I think what we aim to do in the Nourish Yourself course is really suggest that perhaps the thing that you might be seeking is something that is kind of inward and self-oriented rather than to look outward to what somebody else is doing or look
Hmm.
elsewhere for answers. And I think what's scary and challenging about that is that what's inward and what's happening inside the self is something that's ultimately it's unique to you.
Hey everyone, this episode is sponsored by Brooklyn Strength because my studio is what makes this podcast happen. And I'm excited to announce that next week, February 24th, the Nourish Yourself once-a-year coaching program that I co-host with Christina Chaey opens for enrollment. This is a 7-week program where you will develop the tools and resources to finally be able to eat with trust, confidence, intuition, and the information to close out the noise and distraction of the fads, of your cousin's weight loss, of whatever is going on that constantly makes us feel like maybe we're not supposed to be eating dairy, or should I be ridiculously restricting the amount of food that I eat each day. This is a supportive coaching program. It is not a weight loss program, although people's bodies may change depending on where you're at right now and the things that you grow and engage with during our time together. It is my goal that we have as much support as possible for everyone in the group. There's a private chat. You get sessions with me individually. There's a follow-up that's going to happen actually after the course finishes so that people have a little check-in time with me to see how they're doing. It's a wonderful course. If you have questions, you can feel free to reply to this Substack. You can DM me on Instagram at Brooklyn Strength. You can email my studio at info@brooklynstrength. And I really hope you enjoy this conversation with myself and Christina, where we answer some of the questions that come up as themes in Nourish Yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Tobias. This is Busybody Podcast, and this is our second installment of our Nourish preamble, if you will, with my guest collaborator, Christina Chaey. So we did another kind of AMA, kind of on our socials, asking people for questions. And our last episode, we were talking a little bit more about like our our thoughts around our own bodies and food. And this month, we were really asking specifically about the food that you're making and eating, procuring, and what your thoughts are around that. And I think we wanted to do that this month because it's the end of January. We're beyond January. You know, dry January is over. I've been literally seeing those headlines. People, if you kind of did some sort of challenge or refresh or whatever, maybe you're through that or you never finished it or you never started it and you have thoughts about that. It's a time of year where we have a lot of pressure to kind of like change ourselves and our habits. And I think we also, I would imagine most of my listeners are feeling a lot of stress currently with the world that we're living in. And that really impacts a lot of times our ideas of how we care for ourselves, what that means, what's comforting for us. And we got a lot of questions about cravings and what healthy food is. So, Christina, do you have anything that you want to specifically kind of intro about? To your point about this being February, this being a time when people are perhaps realizing that these quick fixes that they embarked on at the beginning of a new year, rooted in resolutions, what have you, might not be working out quite the way they had hoped, or perhaps are realizing that they're not actually quite so sustainable for the way that you want to live your life year round. And so that was really the impetus for this round of questions. We were really hoping to hear from people who might feel like I did try to make a choice to do paleo for a month or do dry January or do something else. And maybe you feel a bit lost about where to go from here. And the question that
I posed was, what are your big struggles with sustainable ways to eat and cook? And the key being sustainability, making it feel like something that you can't, that you not only can tolerate year round, but can actually derive pleasure from and look forward to and be excited about. Because without those things, at least the majority of the time, not all the time, which is something I have thoughts about too, but if you're not feeling those things at least the majority of the time, it's not likely that it's really going to last. And I think that's something that applies to exercise and fitness and movement just as much as it does to food. So
Absolutely.
anyway, yeah, that was the context of why we're doing this recording.
And so the Nourish program starts next month. Our enrollment opens at the end of this month. And we really address these issues in the program with practical information and then support for me one-on-one, support with a live virtual cooking class with you. And a lot of space in our group calls. And there's going to be a lot of forums, which are very curated. When people sign up, you'll get lots of things so that we can really curate to you. To create a space for reflection, to really answer these questions where people are feeling really stuck. And the questions that we got from the Instagram, they really were like consistent, there weren't really any like curveballs. And it's like, I think that a lot of people who are fairly educated around food, like they're not downing, gallons of soda every day and wondering why they feel like crap. Like they have been making attempts to like cook more or eat more vegetables or whatever. But there's this sense of like, as you said, like a real lack of ease, and this kind of, and I think when you don't feel confident in your choices and you don't feel rooted in like, this really works for me, I feel good like this, it leaves you so vulnerable to every new fad or your sister-in-law being like, but I tried this diet and it worked so well. And then you're like, oh my God, should I do it too? And my hope really is like, clear that noise for people by just like giving you foundations to start to work this stuff out for yourself. Because from a very feminist perspective, like that noise keeps us all down. And when we can clear that noise, we can just work on our lives, our careers, our relationships, our hopes, our dreams, and not spend time being like, should I have eaten that bagel? Like, it's just such a waste of all of your precious energies and intelligence.
Yeah.
Should we dive into these questions?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to what you were saying about lack of ease and lack of confidence and how that leaves you really vulnerable to what other people are doing, which resonates for me so acutely as someone who has really struggled with that and with really looking for answers outside of the self, in the world, and especially on the internet, where you can find answers to literally anything you ever had anxiety or rumination about in your life.
And you can also find something that will say anything to you. You know what I mean? If you want to get
you can always find the answer you're looking for.
Exactly. Like if you want to find a dark, hateful answer that like reinforces dark, hateful thoughts you have around yourself, you will find that. If you want to find someone to like guide you out of that, you can find that too, but be wary.
Yeah. And I think especially too, just with the new administration, with all that awfulness, with the continued proliferation of misinformation and that sense of overwhelm, it's like, it just all makes sense. And it's super frustrating and super overwhelming. So anyway, I think what we aim to do in the Nourish Yourself course is really suggest that perhaps the thing that you might be seeking is something that is kind of inward and self-oriented rather than to look outward to what somebody else is doing or look elsewhere for answers. And I think what's scary and challenging about that is that what's inward and what's happening inside the self is something that's ultimately it's unique to you.
Exactly.
It's not really something that can be applied to any other human on earth. And that can be really scary to not have an example to follow, an exact example.
Exactly. Yeah, like an out of the box, like, we're not running a, Christina's gonna send you 6 boxed meals every day kind of a thing.
Right. Here's the manual. Here are
Yeah.
the step-by-step instructions.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it really is about a mentality shift and an openness to want to get to know what's happening inside you too, which I think is a really nice aspect of what we offer.
There's a little bit of effort involved, like positive effort on your part.
Yeah.
Which is what makes
that's
things
a great point. Effort is not, by the by, easy or pleasant to endure the whole way through. It can be ultimately very satisfying, or it can
For
reap
sure.
great benefit, or have long lasting positive effects. But when you're talking about the effort, it's just like, think about the effort exerted in any difficult workout. You're just like, whoa.
Yeah, and I think that's why fads and diets, and even if it's just a challenge to like eat more vegetables, not in a restrictive way, but just in like a, 5 a day challenge or something, it feels really tempting because you've got this like set list of what to do every day. And you're like, great, I don't even have to think about it. I just got to do this thing. But if you don't address like the bigger picture around it, why that wasn't already part of your life, that will just never be sustainable. As soon as you get knocked off the rails because you got sick or you had family in town or you were traveling, then you like completely forget. You're like, oh, right, I was trying to do this thing where I was eating more fruits and vegetables. It has to become like, I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but like a lifestyle shift. You have to really, the way you shift your lifestyle is you realize, oh, this isn't working for me. Why? Why was I doing it? What was I getting out of doing things like that? What can I get out of doing this? You got to put the effort in to look at the bigger picture. So hopefully we give you those resources of like actual information so you can weed out bullshit and that self-inquiry space.
Now, one thing to note about effort, I would say, is that desire to your intentions are in the right place, but there's that desire to want to overcorrect or to take that perfectionist mindset. And so that's a nice segue, I think, into these
Absolutely.
a lot of the questions or the concerns we got from folks in this round of AMAs. And there were a bunch that I as I was reading them was recognizing the overarching theme of, wow, these are really rooted in just pretty strict, rigid, perfectionist beliefs and standards, which I feel that I can say as someone who is a perfectionist and constantly working to break out of that mindset. And on the surface of it, these questions are about all different things. But when you really look, you read, here's some examples. This idea of you obsess over 3 quote unquote healthy meals, grow bored of them, resent cooking, order delivery, repeat. Another about eating well and a colorful plate of whole foods often comes at a price. It needs to be great as leftovers for work the next day, or I'll buy lunch and undo the sustainable cooking. Getting enough or even some fiber at every meal. On the surface, these are all topically different concerns, but what I hear when I read these is like I see the possibility of so many other ways of approaching these concerns than that one perfect solution that you're holding yourself to.
Totally. And it's something that I hear a lot with people's movement practices. It's always this idea of it doesn't count somehow if it's not exactly what it's supposed to be. And I think what's even more interesting to me in that is that you aren't a expert at food and you aren't an expert at fitness, so these pressures that we put on ourselves, it's like saying you'd never brush your teeth if you don't brush your teeth perfectly. And like, I don't know, do you have a water pick? Like, there are a lot of ways to brush your teeth to make it like the best, most cleanest mouth you could ever make. But most of us just like brush our teeth for like not long enough usually, but twice a day, hopefully. And move on because whatever, that was the habit was made when we were like children or whatever. And the idea that this aspect of self-care, it has to be perfect or we never do it, is really intrigues me. I am not a perfectionist, P.S. And that's how, I mean, I don't think you can be a perfectionist actually and be a small business owner because you have too many things to do and you got to just do it and just be like, it's okay if it's not the way that I wished that it was perfectly.
Which I think is an excellent mentality to apply to food, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what originally kind of drew us as we were talking about like our at-home meals. And we are both fans of like, here's this bowl of like super satisfying food that I would not make a guest. And I might not post on Instagram because it looks like a pile of sludge or something. But you're like, it's delicious and I feel good. And I'm getting this in and I'm not going to like weigh it or put garnish on it or, you know, perfectly whatever to get this done. So if we were offering advice right now for the people who, all of these concerns, fiber at every meal, like if I don't have leftovers at work, I'm going to undo it all. That one really broke my heart because that is a real thought process that a lot of people have of like that somehow we lose progress really fast. You know, I was running 3 days a week and then I got sick for 2 weeks and now I lost all of that. And that's just like literally not true. It's just not true. If we were fluctuating like that so wildly, we would be like fainting all the time. Like our bodies would be like expanding and contracting and our digestive system would be like doing all these crazy things. We're actually, our whole system is like really good at just like being a barge, like slow moving directions, you know, which is also, it's hard to change things like, you know, dramatically change your health or whatever. Like it goes slowly, you know? So for the person who's like, I'm going to eat out and ruin my progress. No, you're not. You had a delicious, nutritious meal the night before, and now you had a less supportive meal today, but then you're going to have another nutritious meal at night. Like that's better than not doing that at all. And I would actually suggest that the more you keep practicing that, the more you're going to slowly start to make more and more sustainably supportive meal choices the next day. Start to broaden the recipes that you're making so that you are making recipes that last for your leftovers. Like clearly this person has a real set idea of like what their healthy dinner looks like. So I'm just going to say like they're making like chicken breasts and broccoli and then they used it up or they don't want to eat cold broccoli and chicken breast the next day or whatever. So they're like, it doesn't work as a leftover. Maybe one day they're going to be like, wait a minute, I'll just fucking go next door and use their microwave, you know, or they're going to be like, wait, I could just make chicken salad sandwiches and now I have a lunch for the next day. You know, you can.
And that does, I will say, you know, I want to point out that that does take effort.
Exactly.
It is not without effort.
Exactly. And that like we are in a health crisis in the modern world because we are so pressed for time and we really like hold in such high esteem like efficiency and the idea of anything taking a long time. We're like, oh my God, it takes forever. We don't just value that time of like stirring a pot or like toasting bread in the morning. We're like, I'm wasting time. I'm going to be late. Like, you know, we could shift our mindset, which is also effort to really realize like, where am I putting my effort? Am I staring at YouTube videos when I literally could be making myself a hot breakfast? Like, is that the best use of my time scrolling on Instagram, standing in the bathroom when like in that amount of time I could have scrambled eggs and made toast? Mm-hmm. So yeah, all of this is effort in terms of reorganizing like where your intentions are and like what you're kind of valuing. Sometimes calling yourself out a little bit that like maybe you got to eat cold chicken the next day and it's like not your most favorite thing, but if that means you're not getting like McDonald's delivery at work, you might continue that practice and be like, wow, I feel so much better by the end of the week. Totally worth it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so much there. For me, I think the radical suggestion is that mindset shift of what if you consider an approach in which you acknowledge that you're already succeeding. Like that comment about the leftover. Yeah, it has to be great as leftovers. Otherwise, I'm going to undo all this stuff. To me, I read that and I'm like, wow, you're out here cooking. You're out cooking your own meals and you're having enough for leftovers and you know, whatever. I'm like, that's great. You are killing it.
Yeah, seriously, give pats on back before you already start to like tear yourself down.
Yeah, so it's really just an example of the same information, just considered a bit differently.
Yes.
And yeah. Anyway, okay, so I wanted to go back actually to those few examples that I just mentioned in terms of embodying that perfectionist mindset,
Okay.
because I wanted to just offer these alternative ways, or these questions really, right? So, obsessing over 3 healthy meals, growing bored of them, resenting cooking and ordering delivery, repeat. 100% been there many times. Something that I spot here is that emphasis on healthy meals, right? So number one, what does that even mean? I'm guessing that there is some sort of rigid definition here for this person about what a healthy meal entails, like what it constitutes, what it includes, and what it doesn't. And so from my vantage point, I'm kind of like, okay, if you take the leftovers of a quote unquote healthy meal that you made and you add a side of, I don't know, a side of frozen potato product, like frozen tater tots or something, to
Right.
kind of round it out or make it feel a little more exciting, does that negate, like, is that unhealthy? Is that, or is that a choice that is going to make you feel like you're supporting yourself?
Yeah.
And it really just, the answer might be different from person to person.
Something that makes me think of too, there's been times in my life when work has been so kind of over encompassing that I realized that I was doing a lot of delivery as kind of entertainment, and that my like
Explain.
regular, yeah, that my regular meals, like I like cooking. I think I'm a good cook. I don't eat boring food, but like getting sushi delivery was like, some excitement in a day that had just spent like in meetings and doing emails and running around. And now like the idea of just kind of cooking for myself just feels like yet another thing on my list. And it was super helpful to realize that it really had nothing to do with food. It was like literally I'm understimulated, I'm not getting a balance. And actually, if I just make some dates with friends, which literally also don't have to be food based, but just meeting up with friends to do stuff, spend more time outside, like fulfill myself in other ways, suddenly that kind of urge that in my mind was a craving was actually just like I was bored, like I was like a dog that wanted more treats because I just like wasn't getting enough exercise kind of, you know what I mean?
Right.
And yeah, I think that's especially for people in urban places where delivery is really easy and tempting, it's important to kind of look from a number of angles. Like, what are you getting out of that? Is it literally like, is it taking something off your plate that no pun intended, that you're burdened, like you're just so tired when you get home? Is it that you're kind of lonely and it's sort of like an activity, it might not be always this idea of like I'm being bad, I'm not eating healthy. It might literally be like you're fulfilling some other part of your needs.
Yeah, definitely beyond the scope of my personal expertise, I would say, but something that resonates so much for me on a sort of individual emotional level, for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, eating well and a colorful plate of whole foods often comes at a price. 100%. No, nobody disagreeing with this. However, there's something very evocative to me about the colorful plate of whole foods. Sorry, just making sure I got this. Yes, the colorful plate of whole foods, where again, this is a pretty rigid, prescriptive definition of what a healthy plate of food looks like. And if that's the only way that you're going to feel good about what you're putting on that plate, perhaps that is the thing worth experimenting with or interrogating and being like, could I feel just as good or 90% as good or what have you with 1 to 2 colorful things on my plate alongside my starch of choice and my protein or however you like to compose your meals.
Yeah.
I think you know what I mean. It's
Absolutely. It feels like a really high bar to hold yourself to. It really reminds me of like kind of early 2000, like the bowls everybody would make with like, you know, all these fruits and like tropical fruits and like mango and, yeah, and like coconut slices, but people were eating them
too.
Yeah, these like grain bowls. And if I can also just like throw shade, I think in a lot of like healthy, you know, pop healthy mainstream ideas around health, it's really like ethnicity lists, right? Like those bowls, they don't come from anywhere. They're like some weird 2000s white lady creation. You know what I mean? Like there's nowhere on planet Earth where that's like a historically what people are eating.
Only in the era of Instagram could something like that ever have been
Exactly. And there was like a whole moment, like these like perfect, that I'm really remembering, like Instagram used to be this like rainbow of rainbow foods.
Oh yeah.
Everything. And it was like when people were using filters, it was like super oversaturated. And I think a lot of people still think my salad has to have 18 vegetables in it.
Right. Otherwise, I'm simply not going to make a salad at all, and I'm going to order.
Right, which is like really intense. And the idea that you need to have so many fruits and vegetables in your fridge at all times. You know, a beautiful salad can be made with like lettuce, a nice romaine. I love a Brussels sprout salad, which is like a nice winter salad. So that's a one vegetable salad, you know?
Making me think of one of my favorite like weeknight friendly salads, which is just romaine, and it's a Bon Appetit recipe. It's romaine and a yogurt dressing that's just, it's yogurt and lemon and garlic or something, and then some chopped almonds.
Yeah, done.
That's it. So good.
I mean, I think this kind of tags into this kind of perfectionism and people feeling like there's a lot of effort into making healthy food. That always really confuses me, because to me healthy food is like beans and rice. It's like 2 ingredient stuff, and actually to me the more ingredients that get added in, the more skeptical I am, unless you're making like Thai food and you have a 26 ingredient dressing that's going on top. But like most of the time it's like very simple, like that salad that you just noted. I mean, yeah, I got that. That's my takeaway on that. We're lower that bar, you know. Yeah. Vegetables are healthy. A vegetable is healthy. Not 17 vegetables makes it more healthy. A vegetable. Have a vegetable on the plate.
If the alternative is none.
Right.
100%, you know. And I think with healthy food too, gosh, I'm trying to, my thought escaped me. Whatever, maybe it'll come back to me. But yes, healthy foods can be beans and rice. It, you know, unfortunately, the thing that makes me think of is, well, it can't be beans and rice if your definition of healthy food doesn't include, let's say, carbohydrates. You know, which is that sucks. That sucks.
Yeah, that sucks. And that's where we have resources. I mean, literally, one of the resources you have in the course is a whole workshop on just the basics of nutrition, to just like knock that bullshit out of the park, because your brain 100% relies on carbohydrates. If you don't eat carbohydrates, your big old brain starves. And that's why people that only eat high protein stuff are dumb. No.
To hear what feedback we get on that.
But I wanted to say to the boredom, like this theme that we had a bunch of, like, I get bored of my healthy meals. Food should taste good. It doesn't need to taste bad to be healthy. I think that's like really a thing that people think. We were talking before the recording started about, like, I was like, I really want to know what these people are literally eating that they get bored of. Like, are they eating rice cakes and cottage cheese for lunch? Like, I would get bored of that in 30 seconds. Are they eating like baby carrots and whatever? I don't know, some sad 100-calorie dip or something.
Right.
You know, a balanced meal, like literally upping your ability to cook well, or like just better understanding. We talk a lot about condiments and like making sure you have neat things, good mustard, soy sauce, whatever, in your fridge so you can like make things taste good is really important. And on kind of the note of the meal that has to have 26 vegetables. My partner's dad's my partner's dad and his girlfriend are like 70s cooks. You know, they have this like funny like vegetarian. It's like I always joke. I'm like, it's like your mom's vegetarian friend. You all know what that kind of cooking is like. And they always make these salads that have every vegetable in them. And my partner is always trying to explain to him, he's like, this is not a salad. This is just every vegetable with salad dressing on top of it. He was like, it's not good. I don't want to eat tomatoes and raw broccoli together. It's gross. It's literally every vegetable. There's like cucumbers, broccoli, olives, tomatoes. Like, you're just like, stop. It's the everything vegetable pizza, but like in a bowl.
And raw?
Yes. But they are like from that era of like healthy vegetarian cooking is just a billion vegetables.
Right.
And it's like poorly made, you know? And so
maybe I suppose it is possible that they find it, that they get a lot out of it, or they find it delicious or anything. And that's great. However, I think the danger comes in making that your own personal standard for, okay, if they find that delicious, then I should also find that delicious.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm never going to find that delicious.
I'm never going to find that
delicious. And that is okay.
But I think if someone at home is making that salad, their version of that salad, and they're like, this is my healthy meal. Maybe they're putting like, you know, their chicken breast that they got pre-cooked on top of that. And they're like, this is my healthy meal. Gotta eat this. Like, of course you're getting bored. You know, if that's your inspiration or if that's what you looked up, like healthy weeknight dinner, and that came up and now you make that and you're like, I guess this is my healthy weeknight dinner. Like, what I'm saying is look for better recipes. Like, look for things that you actually want to eat. There's a big difference between eating a Cinnabon and like making a healthy meal that tastes good. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be covered with icing for it to taste good.
Yeah. And I think that touches upon something really prescient and tender, which is that finding out what tastes good to you. Often it involves trying.
Yeah.
It involves trying and tasting and cooking and experimenting with different things. And I think for so many people, there is this, whether it's conscious or latent, this fear of, what if it tastes too good? What if it's too delicious? And then enter cascade of thoughts that are kind of tied up in weight and body image and size and all of that.
So this is huge. I think I've written about this a bunch of times. So many people associate pleasure with being out of control, even if no action of theirs is being out of control, but just the enjoyment of a thing, an experience, a food, a drink, a person, or whatever, we don't give ourselves a lot of space for pleasure. Women are often really punished for experiencing pleasure. Eating something that tastes really good is often internally, we've learned that that's a big red flag. And so that, I think, really ties into my healthy meals are boring, because somewhere the healthy meal is this like very Puritan, 6 grains of rice and like a tiny spoonful of whatever. And that must be what healthy is, because I'm restraining myself. I'm not experiencing pleasure. I'm not inspired to want more. I must be on the right track. And that's just like really sad and like deeply rooted in a lot of misogyny and like just our kind of Anglo-Puritan founding of this country in so many ways. And I think that ties into a big question that people had, which is food waste, which comes up as like a sin, like just a sin. People really get so upset about wasting food, which then stops them from doing that experimenting, which could lead them down this path of pleasure in a really sustainable way where they are actually enjoying food that feels healthy and supportive on a regular basis. But if you don't allow yourself to experiment, which means sometimes you end up burning something and it just goes in the garbage or whatever, then you're never going to get there.
Right. Yeah. The food waste one is great. There's so much to talk about. I also Yeah, I really wanted to leave some space for us to talk about more also practical solutions, takeaways, things that people might be able to actually apply at home in their own kitchens. With food waste, it's hard to know what the source is, and so it's hard to comment on specifically. Is it that you made a bunch of something at once and you get bored and now you're just like, I really can't deal with this anymore, and you're just gonna let it sit there and then you're gonna eventually throw it out and feel really guilty? Is it that you bought an ingredient without having a plan for it necessarily, or your week filled up and you got busy, or something else happened and then the thing goes bad? Is it something else? So, and all of these things have potentially different solutions. Honestly, something that I think maybe could be a useful thought exercise for a lot of folks we heard from is, are you open to making less food at a time?
For sure.
It's interesting because it's something that I have experienced as working really well for me personally, because I suffer from a lot of boredom fatigue really quickly. Like, I get really tired of food fast. There are some things where it's totally fine for me to have a bit more of. For example, if I buy a whole rotisserie chicken, I also live with someone, so obviously there are two of us eating a whole chicken, and that's not that much. But even something like that, if we had 2 chickens worth of meat at once, I would be like, oh God. And so it's just been more beneficial for me, honestly, to cook less food at a time. And the trade-off, of course, and the privilege that I have in this is that I can spend time making a different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, if that person doesn't have that time, getting more proactive about freezing stuff before, like, don't even give yourself the week. Just be like, made this big pot or roasted all this stuff. Half of it, served us up our dinners. Half of it's going in the fridge. Half of what's left is going in the freezer. I don't care if right now I'm like, oh, maybe we will finish this by the end of the week. You can defrost it. Just like take that off your worries and just like freeze it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely something where I flirt with that too, where I'm just like, I'm going to get to it. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And food lasts a lot longer, I think, than people are often comfortable with. People get very nervous about expiration dates and things going bad and vegetables wilting. Vegetables can be really wilted and still be cooked. Absolutely. Like, vegetables can look pretty rough. You can take the outer leaves off of things and they're fine. You can peel them and the inside's fine. Zucchini can be pretty squishy and you can still use it. Like, I think there can be more comfort with that too. I think as soon as people see things going brown or wilty, they're just like, oh my God, it's ruined, it's gone. The millions of delicious soups have been made with wilty vegetables and sauces and all kinds of things. So comfort with that. And also, this fear that things are going bad really fast or something. And so if you didn't eat it in 3 days, it's wasted. A lot of people have just, food is like a place that it's just really unfamiliar. And so there's so much fear that I'm going to not only do something wrong, but like harm myself or someone else. I come from a household where my mom is famous for doing things like cracking eggs into things and going, I feel like those eggs are a little iffy. Oh, well, and like continuing to stir it. My sister and I are like, I'm sorry, what? She has yet to poison us. But I think like developing a little comfort that like the space is much bigger. I love to point out how Americans don't travel enough. You go to other countries, they have things out on counters that Americans would never have at room temperature. Like in Europe, eggs aren't refrigerated because they don't wash them first. Once you wash eggs, they have to be refrigerated. If you don't wash eggs, they don't need to be refrigerated. So it's so wild. As an American, you go to grocery stores in Europe and you're like, oh my God, all the eggs are just not refrigerated at all. Am I allowed to buy this? Like, so freaked out.
Right. And of course, that's not to say that we should be buying eggs from our American grocery stores and leaving them on the counter.
Don't do
Just to be clear, don't do that.
Yeah.
But yes, it is about kind of challenging certain things that we might be uncomfortable with. I also think practical solutions, something I keep in my junk drawer, or my utensil drawer actually, that I use all the time is a Sharpie and a roll of painter's tape. It's just blue painter's tape. I use it because I buy a lot of bulk stuff from the co-op. So I will buy them in baggies and then I'll decant them into containers and then I'll label the containers with the tape and the Sharpie. But I also like if I make something and I know, let's say it's like a soup and I know it's going to be good for probably 5 days. I mean, honestly, probably longer than that, but let's just say 5 days, where I'll take a piece of tape and I'll put it on the container of soup and I'll write the date 5 days out.
That's smart.
To be like, just to know
Like
that
a
when
due
it's
date.
that date. Yeah, when it's that date, just like to start being mindful.
Yeah.
Because my thing is like if I make something or if I make multiple things in advance, I truly can never remember when I made them. And then every single time, when I really look back, I'm like, wow, that was 3 times longer ago than I thought.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I always just am like, I have more time. And often I do, to your point about how food really lasts quite a lot longer than we think, but still, there's a lot of stuff that I've just ended up throwing away for no good.
And if you're a person who stresses about that, and it would help you to be less stressed to like literally write your own expiration date, do that so that you feel more comfortable, 100%. Also, composting. I think people feel so much guilt about throwing stuff away, just straight up throwing stuff away. The yogurt got moldy and now I'm throwing it out, you know? If you have the ability to compost, I don't want to say most places, but city and rural, there are places to compost. I would kind of say it like 100%, even if it's literally that you find out that you have a neighbor who has a garden who would happily take your compost. You know what I mean? Again, this is effort. You got to Google, you got to look around, you got to, you know, poke around your neighborhood and your community if you don't have like actual compost pickup or a system already. But you can freeze all that stuff in a bag and then bring it to wherever your compost is if there's not some kind of like pickup happening. And if that kind of like soothes your heart that you can just pour the end of that stew that you never finish just like in a bag and it's going to get turned into soil, because otherwise what else is happening? It's going in the toilet. It's either going this way or into the dirt. Like this idea of like food waste, I get it on a bigger level of just like restaurants, grocery stores, farms wasting like tons, literally tons and tons and tons of food when there's people that are starving and when we have like such high cost of food, and we could have lower cost of food if there was less food waste on a corporate level, which is also another way to take pressure off yourself. If you're throwing out a couple of apples that went bad, some cheese that got moldy, some leftovers you never eat, on the scale of things, I hear you that you're like, that sucks. I paid for that. I feel wasteful, blah, blah, blah. But like on the scale of things, there are restaurants that are just chucking out fresh bread, like all kinds of things, like just insane amount every day. So food waste could be solved on a much bigger level. And if it makes you feel better to compost it or just relieve yourself of that burden by being like, me tossing a few Tupperware at the end of the week is like really not a big deal, actually.
Yeah. And also, too, I think just another way of addressing food waste in your own life, I think can be about giving yourself some dedicated time to reflect. It could be 1 minute where you're like, I actually didn't need 5 apples. It's more realistic for me to have 2. Because, you know, I totally get how you can go to the store and you're like, oh my God, I need to buy a lot of apples for some reason.
Yeah, I don't buy...
And then you just buy a lot.
Yeah, I don't buy...
Maybe apples are not a good example because apples stay good for like a million months, but you know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't buy soy milk and lettuce, and we buy very specific fresh herbs. I used to kind of impulse buy fresh herbs, and then, you know, they're just small and they're fragile and they go bad really fast. So unless I got better at being like, unless I know what I'm about to use this for, or we've got like 2 herbs that we just regularly use, but I'm not just like grabbing this bunch of basil because like, oh, it's basil, it smells so good, and like everyone loves basil, and then being like, oh, that's so sad, it just died in the fridge and I never did anything with it.
Basil?
Basil.
It's very British of you.
Well, I'm from Massachusetts. But I also don't buy soy milk, even though I love soy milk. I don't buy it often because I never use it enough. You know what I mean? I basically just put it in oatmeal, and if I just have a week where I'm not eating oatmeal, I've opened it a week ago, and then that's one of those things where I'm like, ugh, that's not lasting for a month.
I know.
So I really wish there were like really, like pint-sized versions of all things, but you're making me realize I should buy it, put a small amount in the jar, and then freeze the rest.
I know that is what I was going to say, but of course that's only one solution. That's not the only solution, and it's not necessarily the solution that's going to be right for you or anyone else.
Yeah.
Again, there's effort, and things take effort for sure, but also not every effort is going to be worth it or right for every situation of your life. Which I think is about
you're never going to come up with like the solution for every possible problem, which really does bring us back to perfectionism, where like at some point you've got to take a deep breath and just be like, I am allowed to make mistakes. I am human. I'm allowed to like repeatedly buy soy milk and just toss 75% of it. And then finally just be like, either this is how I live my life, or maybe I don't need to buy soy milk, or maybe I freeze some of it, like whatever. And also like do all of those things over and over again, Right. I will probably freeze one and then forget about it and then buy another one and have one in the freezer. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about this idea of lack of time. Mm-hmm. A huge one, always a huge one when we talk about food, as well as cost.
Yeah.
Cost was a big one too. And I know you have some thoughts on that because you were telling me that you have ways of approaching this in your own life and your own shopping.
Yeah. Sourcing food is like a big kind of like, almost like a hobby of mine, a big interest. I am not snobby about my food. And I am also really lucky to live in an extremely diverse urban area. So there's a lot of options. I also have time and a flexible schedule. And so this is one of those things where I was thinking about this. I like wrote some notes about this one in particular before we talked, because, if you don't have a lot of time to source your food, like literally sometimes I go to 3 different places when I'm grocery shopping, either in one day or throughout the week. If that's just impossible, if it feels like it's already really hard for you, you will have to put some effort into looking for where high quality food exists. It might be a farm that's not close by that does CSA boxes that they, put out that you can subscribe to, something like that. It might be, I use a lot of the Asian grocery stores in Brooklyn for fruit, which are usually really high quality and low priced. That's a little extra effort on my bike, or my partner sometimes will get off the train on his way home from work, stop, get us fruit there, get back on the train. Being open to stuff like that too, like if you have ethnic communities anywhere where you live and you just feel like a very suburban white person, like just buckling up your pants and walking into a place where maybe no one speaks English, because Latin communities are going to source really good fruits and vegetables and stuff. Like if there are Jamaican communities, Asian communities where you live, they are probably like, these are their ethnic foods. They're going to make sure they have access to them so you can find them too. You can buy yourself bananas in a place where no one speaks English, and they might be cheaper and better than at Stop and Shop. But if you really don't have that kind of time, I would really recommend like figuring out a buddy system. Like if you have a friend, you got like one person does the shopping one week and one person does it another week or something like that. Like this is the effort part. If it really matters to you to get high quality food and you live in a place where that's really not possible to find cheaply, that's the effort part of like blocking out your schedule. I guess on Sunday I do drive an hour to this other town where there's like, a this and a that, where I can, pick up this stuff, where I can really source these things. But also being less like I use canned stuff all the time. I use dry beans and grains, which are super cheap. Frozen stuff is a great way to get fresh vegetables that's very inexpensive and high quality. And I think people feel like, there's like stigma around those things, like somehow they're not as good for you, or it's like embarrassing or whatever, because it's that white lady like vegetable fruit bowl, like that that didn't come out of a little baggie from the freezer place. But like string beans are string beans, whether they were frozen or not. Sometimes they're even better when they're frozen, because vegetables don't love traveling if they're coming in from California and live on the East Coast. So I would say like being open. Like, I think a lot of times people are just sort of like, oh, that grocery store is not for me, or like, I don't know what to do at a farm stand or whatever. Like, you gotta like put on your big girl pants and like go into places and ask. I don't know where to find this. I don't know how to know if this is fresh. Can you show me around? And then also be creative if that feels really, really inaccessible, because you have a right to eat food that's good for you and affordable for you. And that might look like really doing some research.
Lack of time. I think a lot of what you just mentioned, honestly, in terms of cost savings, can apply here too. In terms of canned things, frozen things, prepared things. I think there's that idea that it's not truly homemade, or it doesn't really count if it's
half
that
pre-made
Sandra Lee of it, where it's like semi-homemade.
Yes.
Or whatever. But I just think that can be really limiting in a not particularly helpful or productive way. And I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example of something that I've experienced recently. I mean, honestly, I think with lack of time, sometimes when I feel like I have busy weeks, to our earlier point about how, again, your body is this highly tuned machine that is, to use your word, a barge and a really good regulator, there are definitely weeks where I know I'm going to be super busy and I know I'm not going to have a lot of time to cook. And so the stuff I put in my grocery cart that week are going to look different from other weeks when I have more time. And that, I think, can feel like maybe a radical idea, but I'm probably just going to have more things that are prepared or processed on some level, or things that are easy supplements. I'm just thinking about, there are these pouches of prepared seasoned rice or rice pilaf-y things that you just dump in a bowl and you microwave it and it's ready to eat. Things like that are like a great example where it's meaningful time savings to me to not take the 30 minutes to 1 hour to either turn on the rice cooker or make rice on the stovetop. And, maybe that dinner is that rice pouch, I fry an egg and I cut up avocado and I put on some chili crunchies or hot sauce or whatever, great.
Yeah, done.
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think flexibility is I think what you're saying is really true, that it might feel really radical for people to allow themselves that flexibility. I think a lot of people would think a dinner like that, how could that be healthier? It's like not right, because it was like easy and tasty. I mean, that just sounds like warm, gooey, like all the things, kind of comforting. But like you hit all your marks in terms of like nutrition and, all these things. And that also ties back to like a healthy meal doesn't have to be this 26-step process, endless mincing, perfectly pan-searing, whatever. It can just look like the simple ingredients that you have and being prepared to kind of be a little bit more on the fly with it, or recognize your needs week to week.
And that those needs are forever going to be changing.
Forever fluctuating.
Like letting go of that goal of perfect balance all the time.
Yeah.
Which is probably it's the hardest of all.
That is the challenge. That is the challenge.
I feel like that's a lovely place to end.
Me too. Me too.
What wonderful questions and concerns people shared. I really am so appreciative that people really are willing to get real.
Yeah, really engaged. Well, keep your eyes tuned to this space for enrollment opening for our Nourish program, and on my Instagram and website is the full information. And I really look forward to meeting everyone and supporting everyone. And this is a really personalized, intimate group, and the solutions that come out of it also really happen because of the group together, like what they bring to it. So that's a real magic place. That's why these programs, the live programs that I do, are really so satisfying, because it happens because of you. So thank you all so much. And thank you, Christina. Lovely talking to you too.
That was Busybody Podcast. I'm the founder and owner of Brooklyn Strength Studios. You can find me on Instagram at Brooklyn Strength. You can find out more about my offerings on my website, brooklynstrength.com. I hope you'll subscribe to my Substack after class. All's in the show notes. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Please share with your friends so that more people listen to this podcast. I love these conversations, and I hope more people can hear them. My music is by Rob Byrne, performed by the Wild Yaks. My podcast is produced by Brad at Soundtrain Studios, and my illustrations are by Jackie Mendez and Azul Trejo, and edited by myself. Thank you so much.